Hey guys, Ryan Earnhardt here from CreativeSoundLab.tv. Today we're going to be talking about pairing two mics that are very different from one another on a guitar cabinet. So today we're going to be checking out two very different mics, sonically and in price as well. The AEA N8 Ribbon microphone and then the Pyle 78 microphone. It's basically a knockoff 57. It doesn't have a transformer in it, and it's pretty bright. I mean, it's really bright. Now, this idea came to me from my friend Dan James. He's a doctorate student that I've been talking to, and he told me about this technique that he really loves to do with a transformerless SM57 and then a darker ribbon mic on guitar cabinet. I said, it sounds really funny to have a 57 out that far from the guitar cabinet. He said, dude, you gotta try it, it's a really cool pairing. They're just such a different sound between the two mics. So I decided to give it a shot. Now, for today's experiment, and I want to kind of give the backstory and how I set these mics up. I'm not familiar with this Pyle mic. I don't know exactly where the diaphragm is. And so in order to set this up, I decided to use a technique using a click track. I reamped a click track through the guitar cabinet. You can also just pluck, very percussively a guitar string, do a very quick test recording, and make note that the transients are coming in at the same time to both microphones. A lot of times in these dynamic mics, it's a little hard to know exactly where the diaphragm is. So you just want to make sure that both mics are in a really good phase relationship. They're both getting the sound at the same time. Once I knew the phase was good, it was time to try out this technique. Now, the idea that I was using here was to get two very different sounds, and a sound that really wouldn't sound good on its own, but they would sound good together. So I was looking for kind of a dark sound out of the ribbon, a bright sound out of the Pyle. Now, the Pyle wants to be up close. It's a cardioid. It needs some proximity effect to sound full in the low end. The ribbon has a lot of proximity effect. Figure eights have the most proximity effect, and it needs the distance to have the balance in sound. It actually needs probably about 6 to 8 inches to have a nice balanced sound. And the Pyle really needs to be right up on the grill cloth. But here, both mics are not exactly in their best position. So it's about finding the sweet spot with your distance and dialing in that proximity effect. Go too close, you have more low end. Too far, you have less low end. And so we're having kind of a shared load between the two mics. It's not going to sound perfect on its own. We want it to sound great together. So I moved the amp in slightly, then moved it back just to find the sweet spot. Let's check it out. Okay, and just to prove a point, here's an example of a longer distance where the N8 sounds fantastic, and it's just way too far for the Pyle. And so this example is probably a little bit too far for what we want. And so the figure eight's going to have the most proximity effect we want that to be just a little too close. We don't want it to be a perfect sound on its own. We want it to emphasize what it's good at, the low end. And then the Pyle, we want it to really shine on the high end. And what about the balances of these two mics? Well, in my test today, I found that the Ribbon really didn't need a whole lot, probably about 9 dB less in my mix versus the Pyle. Okay, and what's interesting about this is that if I were to flip the polarity of this is actually where a lot of the mid-range gets canceled out. So this is where a lot of the cancellation is happening in the balance of these two microphones. I can't really say that this would be a great way to always get a balance sonically, but I think that mathematically, this is where about both mics are pretty even in the mid-range, which is kind of interesting. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Be hanging out in the comments below.